got a guy coming out next weekend to look at buying the Jaguar. And I need to make sure he's going to have it shipped to where he lives. So I'm going to have to make sure it runs and drives and everything. And I want to make sure it runs good for him. And wouldn't you know it, everything's just all of a sudden, some of the stuff I've been struggling with, but now I'm finding more and more issues as it's coming time to sell the car. This happens every time I do anything. Anytime I try to sell a car, the week before, everything else on it breaks. I don't think the alternator's charging. I switched the wires. I looked at the wiring diagram for a Mazda RX-7 the alternator's out of, and for a Cadillac that the engine's out of. And the wiring is all custom in this. And the alternators are the same in the way they wire up. You have a main power wire, and then you have a field wire and a sensing wire. And I had it wired up correctly, and it wouldn't charge. And so I think the alternator's bad. This is the second alternator I've had in this car, and anyways, frustrating. It looks like my oil cooler line is leaking. Yep, that's what's leaking down there. That's where I'm getting my oil from. But that's not a problem. I'm worried the oil pan is leaking, and I've worked on that oil pan. But this guy's flying in from out of town to look at the car because his team is interested, and I'm trying to make sure that I'm not a dirtbag seller. I want the guy to know honestly everything that's wrong with it, and I want to give him something that's good that he can work with. But I haven't been able to get this thing on the track reliably. And here it is, I'm trying to get it to him, and I can't even get it reliable to sell it to him. Years and years ago, I read a letter that my grandpa wrote to my aunt. Right after the end of World War II, he was island hopping the Pacific. They had him fixing planes and stuff to get stuff back from overseas and to support some of the missions that were still going on in the Philippines and Japan. And they took off in a C-47, and immediately something was wrong with the engine. So they landed, and he had to work on it. And he thought he fixed the engine, and they took off again, and they got up to altitude and had a misfire. And they landed, and he worked on it again. Third time, they took off and flew, and they had a misfire. And he said, "What kind of mechanic am I that I can't figure out what's wrong with this?" And that was really important for me to read that letter from my grandpa to my great aunt, because I run into that all the time. And I think if you're a mechanic, you probably run into it too. We just don't always talk about it. And so the new guys get in, and they don't understand, why they can't get anything right. Why is everything broken all the time? Why am I doing these fixes and they just don't work? Sometimes it's quality of work. You gotta look critically at the quality of your work. Are you slapping stuff on there? Are you doing that? Are you doing half a repair, or are you going in there trying to do it right? And when I first built this car, I threw it together fast, me and some guys, because we wanted to take it and race, and it was another failure for other issues. But since then, I've tried to straighten everything out and make perfect the car, and it just isn't getting perfected. So, hopefully I get this together, and he likes the car and buys it, and I hope it's a success for him. But I've got work to do to get it there. I think it's working now. The charging light's staying on, but I believe there's supposed to be a diode in there, and I think I left the diode out. I'll have to look into that and see if that's the case. But so far, I found the oil cooler line loose, and I tightened it back up, and I think that's fixed that. And I'm hoping it's good to go next week when he comes to buy it. Not sure. It doesn't look like the transmission's leaking anymore. Oil fan plug can be tightened up a bit, I think. It looks like it's seeping a little bit. Of course, that being that custom pan, I tested it and it didn't leak. And my biggest fear is it just magically sprung a leak again. Because that's how things go for me when I work on cars. But anyways, I'll be sad to see the Jaggernaut go. At the same time, I'll be glad to see the Jaggernaut go. I really want to see this car succeed. And it's never been anywhere close for me. So, all right, so I think I got things working right. Voltmeter's reading 14 volts when the engine's running, so I'm pretty sure the alternator's charging, but the charging light's staying on. And I know I've got it wired up right, so I'm not sure what's going on. Alternator's good. The oil pressure gauge is reading, the temperature gauge is reading, the voltmeter's reading. The fuel gauge I'm not sure about. I've only got a gallon of gas in here and it's reading empty, and it's a 16-gallon tank, so I think the fuel gauge is right, but I think there's just not enough fuel in it to measure. And I'm not going to put a whole bunch of gas in this thing. If it's going to be, it may be sitting for a few months, and really you don't want to, if it's going to be sitting any length of time, you don't want to keep gas in it. You want to drain your race car if it's going to be sitting for a few months. And I've got a plug right there on the fuel cell that I can just pop loose and drain all the fuel out of it. So I feel a lot more comfortable about selling it to them. It does not appear to be leaking oil anymore. Well, not up front. It's leaking oil back at the back of the oil pan, and that maybe that I know that the plug wasn't quite sealing up right, wasn't sealing flush, and so that's something for them to sort out. The price I'm selling this for, I'm not going to do a whole lot more work to it. Hopefully, I get my other camera charged up and we can get some ride-along video around the yard before I sell it.